Hello, folks. It's happening. We're here. Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp. Thanks for being here. I will be reading you today several portions of Hamas's statement on what went down on October 7th. They have finally put out a long description of what exactly happened on October 7th and where it differs from Israelis' point of view or Israeli propaganda on what they say has happened on October 7th. Now, whether you decide after I read these things that Hamas is lying or the IDF is lying or Israel is lying or whoever's lying or the U.S. is lying, whether you decide any of those things, it doesn't really change that fact that genocide is taking place right now. So you can believe all Israel's propaganda, all of it, all of the time, and still go, oh, but also genocide. So this is not to say that this, reading Hamas's statement changes the reality after October 7th. It doesn't. It's still genocide either way. But I like to get to the source of the truth. I like to find out what the reality is. And that is why I'm going to bring you what the mainstream media generally will not bring you. One of the things they will not bring you is Hamas's statement, at least most of it, on what exactly went down October 7th. And you're going to find some of it shocking, I guarantee you. And I'll leave it to you as to what you choose to believe, which side you believe is relaying more of the truth. You will get to decide that on your own, which is kind of part of getting to the truth, is hearing all sides, which is why I'm bringing the stuff the mainstream media won't bring you. Let's get to Hamas's statement, which the mainstream media will, at least Western mainstream media, will essentially not bring you at all. Now, I am not saying, I'm not one of these people, and I don't know how many there are, that think that everything Hamas ever says is true, everything Israel ever says is false. I'm not saying that either. The first victim of a war, a battle, a genocide, etc., is the truth. That's a famous quote, right? First victim of war is truth. So I'm not bringing this to you to say everything Hamas says is true. I'm bringing it to you so that you can get the side that is not on your mainstream media and come to a conclusion as to what you believe is true. So let's read just a little bit of this. Now, the thing's like, 17 pages long or something, so I'm not reading you all of it, but I am going to read a substantial portion. You can find it online, Hamas's statement on October 7th, which they just put out is either yesterday or the day before. They say, in light of the Israeli fabricated accusations and allegations over Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on October 7th and its repercussions, we in the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, clarify the following. Operation Al-Aqsa Flood targeted the Israeli military sites. And this is a key point because many people in Israel, the initial statements on it was that Hamas overran the border, right? Because they're a free people, right? They're not in a prison at all, but there's a wall there with barbed wire that they're not allowed to leave. So that's interesting. If they're not in prisoners, then why is it they're imprisoned? Could you explain that? Anyway, they get through the barrier, the wall, the barbed wire, everything. And then Israel's stance was they just came in and killed everyone they saw. That was what we were told. They just came running in, murdered everyone they came across. That is increasingly shown to not be reality. This does not mean that Hamas militants didn't kill innocent people. I don't know if we'll ever know all of the truth on that, but it seems that everything we've seen, all the evidence we've seen, all the witnesses we've seen, are not saying that Hamas just came running in, guns ablaze, killing anyone they came across. It seemed that they were going towards military and police installations. And yes, they were killing IDF. Yes, they killed anyone that came at them with a gun because it's important to remember that essentially everyone in Israel serves in the military. So even people who are for 2 years, so even people who are not in the military used to be in the military. Many of them have guns. So if you're ex-military and you have a gun, then all of a sudden that's a little different than just an innocent guy walking down the street. But anyway, so they targeted military sites to continue from their statement and sought to arrest the enemy's soldiers to pressure on the Israeli authorities to release the thousands of Palestinians held in Israeli jails through a prisoners exchange deal. I've mentioned this a lot, that Israel has somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 hostages that they're holding that mainstream media will never mention to you. In fact, when they did the one prisoner swap that they actually have done, and Israel released women and children, several women and children from their prisons, a lot of Americans didn't understand why Israel had women and children in prison, like Palestinian women and children. But they didn't they were like, wait, who are they releasing? We didn't know they had anyone, because mainstream media has not told you that Israel's been holding thousands of Palestinian hostages for years. And they've arrested somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 more since October 7th. Anyway, therefore, the operation focused on destroying the Israeli army's Gaza division, the Israeli military sites stationed near the Israeli settlements around Gaza. Number two, avoiding harm to civilians, especially children, women, and elderly people, is a religious and moral commitment by the Al-Qassam Brigade's fighters. Okay, so Hamas is saying that it is a religious duty of theirs to protect innocent civilians, especially women, children, and elderly. Now, you can decide, it's up to you, whether that's a lie from Hamas or whether it's a lie from Israel that they came running in, killing babies and etc. But the evidence that we've gotten, the 40 beheaded babies things has been completely debunked, even so much so that even the White House backtracked on it and said, we actually have no evidence of that. Yes, there are many women and children killed, but in many cases, we have seen that it was in buildings where Hamas fighters were also burned, meaning the IDF came in, shot tank rounds at these buildings, and killed everyone inside. So in the cases where we've seen these burned bodies, there's a lot of evidence that this was IDF taking out the whole building. Now, I don't know that Hamas didn't kill any women and children. And also, let's remember, women also serve in the military. Many women over there have guns. So if these Hamas militants are, running from installment to installment and they're shooting anyone who comes at them with a gun, of course, they're probably shooting some women as well. So that's an important thing to remember. And again, I'm not endorsing any of this. I want you guys to have the truth just like I want the truth. I want the opposite of what the mainstream media wants for you, which is to bring you a propagandistic side of this. I want you guys to have the truth. And if you also want to throw in here, which I know this is important to some people, that even the UN has reaffirmed multiple times over the years that an occupied people have the right of armed resistance. Even the UN has said, if you are an occupied people by an invading force, you have the right to armed resistance. And, I don't think there's any real argument that those being held in an open air prison in Gaza are not, when they're water, food, medical supplies, everything is decided by Israel, that's not an occupation, that's not a settler colonial situation. I think you'd have to be kind of deluding yourself to act like it's not. Okay, so let's see. So they say it's a religious, moral commitment to not kill civilians, children, women, and elderly. We reiterate that the Palestinian resistance was fully disciplined and committed to the Islamic values during the operation, and that the Palestinian fighters only targeted the occupation soldiers and those who carried weapons against our people. In the meantime, the Palestinian fighters were keen to avoid harming civilians, despite the fact that the resistance does not possess precise weapons. In addition, if there was any case of targeting civilians, it happened accidentally and in the course of confrontation with the occupation forces. So they're admitting, and this to me actually gives more veracity to their statement. I would think that if Hamas said, no innocent person was ever killed in the whole thing, 2 days or whatever it was of endless violence, we didn't accidentally kill a single innocent person. you'd be a little more like, it sounds like that's probably tough to achieve that. But here they're actually admitting that if innocent civilians were killed, it happened accidentally. So they're admitting it could have happened in the firefights. Anyway, since its establishment in 1987, the Hamas movement committed itself to avoiding harm to civilians. After Zionist criminal Baruch Goldstein in 1994 committed a massacre against Palestinian worshippers in the Ali Ibrahimi Mosque in occupied Hebron City, this is 1994, the Hamas movement announced an initiative to avoid civilians the brunt of fighting by all parties. But the Israeli occupation rejected it and even did not give any comment on it. The Hamas movement also repeated such calls several times, but received by a deaf ear from the Israeli occupation, which continued its deliberate targeting and killing of Palestinian civilians. So they're saying that they have tried over the years to insist on an agreement between the sides that innocent civilians would not be targeted, and Israel has shown no interest in even entertaining such a thing. Because, as we know, Israel has the Hannibal Directive, which is the whole point of it is killing innocent people. It is, if someone's taken hostage, you kill them, you kill the hostage takers, and you kill everyone around them who's innocent. So Israel has, mandates of war that are all about killing innocent people. Anyway. To continue from the Hamas statement, maybe some faults happened during Operation Al-Aqsa Flood's implementation due to the rapid collapse of the Israeli security and military system and the chaos caused along the border areas with Gaza. As attested by many, the Hamas movement dealt in a positive and kind manner with all civilians who have been held in Gaza. And all the interviews, you'll notice that essentially all the interviews that have been done with those hostages that were held in Gaza, they said very positive things of the way they were treated. This doesn't mean that they were like, yeah, I should have been taken hostage. That was great. But they have said positive things about how they were treated. Many made a lot of the hugs they gave to their captors. Some of them gave to their captors before they left. But Israel then made sure to stop all interviews between those who were held captive because they didn't want those type of sentiments getting out, that they were treated well in captivity. To continue from the statement, and sought from the earliest days of the aggression to release the captives. And that's what happened during the week-long humanitarian truce, where those civilians were released in exchange for releasing Palestinian women and children from Israeli jails. And that's exactly apparently what Hamas wanted, was to take these hostages, get Palestinians released from the jails, show that they had the ability to come at Israel like this, resist Israel like this. But Israel has largely refused, except for that one exchange, largely refused to entertain more exchanges because, and I've said this essentially since the beginning, whether Israel knew about this or not, and the New York Times has admitted they did know that October 7th was coming, whether they knew, and someone else mentioned that the stock markets showed people knew something was about to happen, but whether they knew it was going to happen or not, they're using this. They're using this to achieve the ethnic cleansing that they've been going for years and years. To continue from the statement, what the Israeli occupation promoted of allegations that the Al-Qassam brigades on October 7th were targeting Israeli civilians are nothing but lies and fabrications. The source of these allegations is the Israeli official narrative, and no independent source proved any of them. And again, I'm not saying Hamas always tells the truth or Israel always tells the truth, but that part seems to be true, that all of these crazy allegations of Hamas killing babies and mass rape and all this stuff, we haven't seen evidence. We're still waiting for it. And in fact, Israel has been destroying the evidence. Israel said that they're going to shred and bury the burned cars from the music festival. They say for environmental reasons. So again, I'm not just assuming one side or the other is telling the truth. I'm saying if you're going to make those accusations, fucking show us some goddamn proof, but they won't. And that leads me to believe there probably isn't any. Video clips taken on the day of October 7th. By the way, Israel has suppressed most video footage. Video clips taken on that day, October 7th, despite being the most surveilled place on the planet, along with testimonies by Israelis themselves that were released later, showed that the Al-Qassam Brigade's fighters didn't target civilians, and many Israelis were killed by the Israeli army and police due to their confusion. And believe it or not, Hamas in this statement right there is being nice. Like they're actually giving Israel a little bit the benefit of the doubt, saying they killed civilians in confusion. But as we know, we've seen the tank gunners say they knew there were civilians in these buildings and they shot anyway. So it's not just confusion. It was a mandate to go in there and kill everyone. To continue from the statement, it has also been firmly refuted, the lie of 40 beheaded babies by the Palestinian fighters. Even Israeli sources deny this lie now. Many of the Western media agencies, unfortunately, adopted this allegation and promoted it. The suggestion that the Palestinian fighters committed rape against Israeli women was fully denied, including by the Hamas movement. A report by the Mondoweiss news website on December 1st, among others, said there is a lack of any evidence of mass rape allegedly perpetrated by Hamas members on October 7th, and that Israel used such allegation to fuel the genocide in Gaza. I've brought this to you as well, that, and yet again, if more evidence comes to light, then okay, but there have been more than one article from Mondoweiss, at least one from Haaretz newspaper and others, saying that Israel has had a real tough time finding any evidence to support this mass rape thing. And, you know, most of what went down on October 7th and 8th was intense and furied fighting. Not a lot of, like, you know, long-term, like, we're going to go rape people kind of stuff anyway. But I'm just saying, like, you'd have to provide some kind of, with all the evidence and cameras and witnesses, there's people that survived and they haven't been able to find anyone to bring forward evidence of this. But again, if the evidence comes forward, okay, there it is. It won't change the fact that Israel's committing genocide. That won't change. Rape or no rape. Thank you, Aramona, for the donation. You rock. Really appreciate you guys keeping this show going. Couldn't do it without you. All right, let's keep going here. According to two reports by the Israeli Yedioth Aharonot newspaper on October 10th and the Haaretz newspaper on November 18th, many Israeli civilians were killed by an Israeli military helicopter, especially those who were in the Nova Music Festival near Gaza, where 364 Israeli civilians were killed. I brought you a bunch of evidence about what happened at that music festival, a bunch of evidence that civilians were being fired on by Israeli police, a bunch of evidence that the military helicopters arrived and started shooting up the cars that couldn't get out, a bunch of evidence that the police and the military sealed off the exits so that these civilians couldn't escape. Now, you're welcome to argue that this was all done in confusion and they just thought everyone was Hamas and so they shot everyone. Fine, you can argue that. But even Israeli families, some of the Israeli families of the victims at the music festival are now suing the Israeli government for killing civilians. So the people that want to deny this are really fighting a losing battle here, that a lot of the civilians killed were killed by IDF or Israeli police. There's just too much evidence showing otherwise. And now, of course, Israel wants to shred and bury all those cars because you wouldn't want people looking in to what kind of bullet holes are in those cars, because it's not going to be good. Not going to be good to be like, oh, these are the kind of bullet holes that go with the kind of guns that happen to be on IDF helicopters. That type of thing would not go over well. So I got an idea. Let's shred and bury all these cars. The two reports said the Hamas fighters reached the area of the festival without any prior knowledge of the festival, where the Israeli helicopter opened fire on both the Hamas fighters and the participants in the festival. The Aharonot newspaper also said the Israeli army to prevent further infiltrations from Gaza and to prevent any Israelis being arrested by the Palestinian fighters, struck over 300 targets in areas surrounding the Gaza Strip. So you have this IDF helicopters just running around shooting, God knows what. I don't know if it's missiles or grenades, but at anything and everything that's moving. Furthermore, the occupation authorities revised the number of their killed soldiers and civilians from 1,400 to 1,200. And we're about to get to a very important point that I don't think I highlighted or thought about till I saw this statement. They revised it down from 1,400 dead on October 7th to 1,200 after finding that 200 of the burnt corpses had belonged to Palestinian fighters who were killed and mixed with the Israeli corpses. Interesting, that is. If the Palestinian fighters were burned in the same event, whether it be a tank round or a grenade or whatever else, if they were burned in the same event as the civilians, the hostages, the Israelis, then guess who didn't do the burning? The people who are dead in the burning. Which means, guess who did do the burning? Oh, the people who survived and were outside shooting in, i.e., the IDF. So this is evidence that many of these burned buildings and burned corpses were burned by IDF, by the Israeli government. And this also goes with the Hannibal Directive. And Hamas says this means that the one who killed the fighters is the one who killed the Israelis. Boy, tough to figure that out, huh? And it's amazing that the mainstream media won't cover this. A lot of independent reporters won't cover this. Israel has been forced to admit that a lot of those burned bodies, 200 perhaps, were Palestinian fighters, okay? Hamas fighters. And because they revised the number down. So they had to admit that. So if they had to admit that, then they're basically you can just deduce, by deduction, they're admitting that the people that burned these people are IDF, are the ones shooting at the buildings, which we have the tank gunners on camera saying they shot at civilian structures. They were told to shoot with tank. The one interview I saw, the woman said she was told to shoot with tank rounds, but when she decided there were civilians in there, she only shot with her gun. Which it's like, oh, well, maybe you'll kill fewer of the civilians, but you're still killing civilians. Anyway, it is also a matter of fact that a number of Israeli settlers and settlements around Gaza were armed and clashed with Palestinian fighters. I'm going to wrap this up in a second. Those settlers are registered as civilians, but are in fact Israeli army. Hopefully most of you understand this now, that everybody in Israel serves at least 2 years in the military. Many of them serve much more, but at least 2 years. So all of these people living in these settlements are ex-Israeli military. They all, if you're going to live in a settlement near Gaza, then you can bet your ass that they are a little bit afraid of attack that ended up happening, which you can bet your ass that almost all of them have guns. That doesn't mean every individual is walking around with a gun, but there's a lot of guns there. So this means that although we and the mainstream media can sit here and go, Hamas killed innocent, so many innocent civilians, everything, in that moment where they were coming in to take hostages and they've got people running at them with guns, well, that stops being a civilian in their eyes. Again, I'm not saying this is how I would behave or justifying any of it. I'm just saying if you're in that situation, if you're approaching an area and someone comes running at you with a gun, you don't go, oh, that's an innocent civilian. You go, oh, that's a militant coming at me. So this idea of, innocent civilians is a shady area, but again, I'm not saying no innocent civilians were killed by Hamas at that time, as even Hamas has admitted. They said mistakes may have happened, but our goal was not to kill any unarmed civilians. To continue, just finish up here, the brutal killing of civilians is this is the Hamas statement, is a systematic approach of the Israeli entity. And we are now seeing this in Gaza, right? You can't look away and not know that's happening. You can't not know Israel's targeting civilians. That 70% of the 25,000 they've killed are women and children. And 43% are children. They are clearly targeting civilians. It's inarguable. Anyway, to continue from the statement, the killing civilians is one of the means to humiliate the Palestinian people. The mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza is clear evidence of such approach. The ALJAZEERA news channel said in a documentary, in 1 month of the Israeli aggression on Gaza, the daily average killing of Palestinian children in Gaza was 136, while the average of children killing in Ukraine in the course of the Russian-Ukrainian war was 1 child every day. So that's the difference between what Israel's doing and modern warfare in general is, in the Ukraine proxy war, you've got 1 child murdered a day. In Gaza by Israel, you've got 136 murdered a day. In modern warfare, in the past 25 years, the average number of children killed in battle is something like 6 to 8% of those dead. In Gaza, it's 43 or 45%. So it's just a completely different world. This is just mass genocide. Okay, I hope you found that informative, and I hope you found that to be something that the mainstream media will not bring you, is Hamas's statement, and I will let you decide where the truth lie. But here's one more thing. This is a relative of one of those abducted. So this is Israeli, a relative speaking on Israeli television. The person that is a hostage is Ofer Calderon, and her name is Noam Don. She says, "We are being carried out by the Hannibal procedure. My cabinet, my prime minister, my defense minister are carrying out operations on my family, on men and women who were kidnapped from their homes, the Hannibal procedure. We understand that we are killing our people." So that is an Israeli who's had a family member abducted, who has a family member being held hostage by Hamas, saying that they know that the Israeli government is murdering their own family.